Hello, beautiful souls. Thank you so much for dropping by this video. To anyone who's new to this channel is dedicated to helping people understand the difference between actual non-duality and fake non-duality, often called Neo-Advaita. And a warm welcome back, of course, to any return viewers or frequent flyers. So, why is Neo-Advaita so hard to leave? It's a question I sit with often because I've shared on this channel many times. I realized in 2004 that there was a vast difference between actual non-duality and Neo-Advaita. And I also realized it was harmful for me, but I was not able to really exit it until 2018. And then it took me until 2021 to firmly say no and to start on another path. That's a pretty long time. It's what, 17, 18 years. I've had people, I have email dialogue going on with one person who says it's really hard for them to let go of the idea of, actually two people, that's been very hard to let go of the idea of predetermination, that everything is determined, which is one of Neo-Advaita's favorites of like, there's nothing to do because everything's already determined. So, it's really interesting because one of the two people said that they've seen through Neo-Advaita as well and see that it's wrong, but they're not able to let go of that part of it. And another person who wrote me recently said that they saw that Neo-Advaita was wrong and they left, but then they found a way back into a more subtle form of Neo-Advaita. So it really begs the question, what's so enticing about Neo-Advaita? Why is it so hard to leave? I don't have an answer that maybe will address this for everyone. I think every person's a little different and the draw is a little different. But I do think I have some of the puzzle, maybe a large part of the puzzle. I don't know. You'll let me know. So part of it is it's addictive. I become very clear that Neo-Advaita is its own form of addiction. So if you think about it, an addiction is where you have pain about something and you do something to numb the pain, whether that's drink something, take some kind of chemical, pornography, overeating. You do something to suppress or numb or dissociate from the pain. So doing that isn't necessarily addictive. Everybody distracts themselves sometimes. But addiction is where you get locked into a cycle of doing that to the point where you literally lose a certain amount of willpower. You can ask any alcoholic or drug addict, why do you do it? And they'll give all sorts of answers, but they'll also sometimes say, I don't know. I can't stop. That seems crazy to someone from the outside, but as someone I've struggled with multiple addictions. As an insider, I can say it is crazy, and that's what happens. You literally lose your willpower. It's one of the most baffling components of addiction. That's not to say that you can't gain it back. So I believe that's part of it, is a literal loss of willpower. And this combined with, with the idea of predeterminism, or that there's nothing to do, those philosophies weaken your willpower. Now, I shared some quotes last time from Ramana Maharshi where he talks about that you must make effort. You must engage your will if you want to be free. At a certain point, he said, you will be unable to engage your will. And that would be the completion of the process. And that's what Neo-Advaita does, is it always skips to the end and doesn't give a reliable means for how to get there. So I believe that's part of the puzzle, is this combination of addiction and then the second component would be philosophies that decrease your willpower and decrease your capacity to make good and right choices. Now, another very interesting component of it, hi Gregory, hi Marion, I'll check out your comments in a minute, is goes back to the gunas. So the gunas are a fundamental part of non-dual philosophy, and they're a fundamental part of Hindu philosophy as a whole. And so the gunas are the qualities of mind. And so one of the qualities is called tamas, which many ways to translate it: ignorance, delusion, lethargy, lack of motivation, lack of will. So whether it's traditional non-duality or any traditional Hindu school of spiritual growth, you always deal with tamas first. You get rid of excess tamas guna. You can't do serious spiritual practice. You can't succeed. It's serious spiritual practice if there's a lot of ignorance, delusion, lethargy. The person just won't have the motivation. They won't have the clarity of mind, and they'll literally be deluded. And it's a very dark form of delusion. Like we're all, to a certain extent, until you're enlightened, you have a certain level of delusion. We all do. But this is very dark delusion. This is like, the person who, I saw this, I was just out for a walk one day, and someone had, I guess, finished drinking their beer, and they put it underneath their car tire. They were like at a red light, and they put it underneath their car tire. So then when they pulled over it, they rolled over it. And it's one of the best examples of tamas I've ever seen. Just like senseless, meaningless destruction. Okay, in this case, not huge destruction, but destructive for no purpose. Now that glass will be in the road for, the next 500 years, the shards of it, and just senseless, literally without any sense. That's what tamas is. And so Neo-Advaita increases tamas guna. I've talked a lot about the why of that. It's a little technical. The short version is it makes you inactive, and it causes mood swings. And over time, it actually increases ignorance. Many of us experience that. And that's part of why Neo-Advaita is so baffling, is we'll have these moments of lucidity mixed with these moments of just utter craziness and insanity, because it's destabilizing. Not taught properly, self-inquiry or other non-dual concepts will destabilize the personality. I've read the letter of the person who, at a certain point, all they did was sit on their couch. They would get up and get some food, and then they would go sit on their couch. They couldn't work. They couldn't have relationships. And inwardly, they were in hell. They were in utter misery, yet they were simultaneously just watching it. They were just stuck in between heaven and hell, and hence it was more like hell than heaven. And that's I think the other piece is there's so much truth in Neo-Advaita. If only Neo-Advaita was just 100% false, then we could just be like, F that, But it does have some very profound truth. And the practices will connect you, create a connection to truth and a genuine spiritual experience. It's just done in an unskillful way that over time it ends up being harmful. So those are a few of the reasons that I can understand. And the last piece is, I can't quite explain how, but Neo-Advaita concepts, once you've accepted them, it's very hard to unaccept them. I can't explain that yet. I'm still working on trying to explain that. Once you accept the idea that everything is predetermined, it's very hard to find your way out of that. Once you accept the idea there is no me, which is completely false. It's a complete falsification of the teaching, by the way. But once you take that seriously, it's very hard to find your way out of that idea. I think part of the reason is because these are very fundamental ideas and they go in deep. And once they've been accepted as true, it's very hard to let them go. So those are a few of my thoughts. And let's see. Hi, Gregory. Thanks for saying hi. Marion wrote, hi, some people seem predisposed to addiction, which also includes addiction to spirituality. Thank you. It's my understanding as well. For genetic reasons and because of family history, some people seem predisposed. And that's the thing is, who would have thought spirituality could be addictive? But there's many, many types of addictions. It's not just drugs and alcohol. There are many, and who could have thought that spirituality was one of them? We could say neo-spirituality, but so that's everything on my mind and heart right now. If anyone has any questions or more comments, please do. I think and the one other piece is a lot of people turn to Neo-Advaita because they have extreme suffering. I was one of them. And the false guru will promise an end to the suffering, and they can't deliver. So part of it's desperation. Part of it is it'll 50% work. It's like it'll 50% relieve your suffering and 50% increase your suffering. So in the short term, Neo-Advaita works. Your suffering will disappear, but then it'll come back with a vengeance. So part of it is that hook of having these powerful experiences of transcending suffering. And, a lot of people go there with straight up mental illness. And I've shared on this channel, I have complex PTSD. And, a true guru would probably be able to help with a serious mental illness, and they would probably also recommend that you see a doctor or a counselor or address it like Ayurvedically, address some of the underlying imbalances. But Neo-Advaita teacher is just inquire, or the ridiculous philosophical word games. I don't even want to call it philosophical. The ridiculous word games that sound philosophical of, well, there is no you. So who is it that's suffering? That's not a legitimate medicine for serious suffering. Anton. Anton wrote, yeah, it's like taking a drug without knowing it's a drug at first. So from my studies, and just based on what Adi Shankar and Ramana Maharshi wrote, the ideas and the practices that are taught in a Neo-Advaita satsang, they're only meant for a very refined, stable, balanced person. And of course, to boot, then the things are being taught wrongly. But self-inquiry is not for the general public. Don't take my word for it. Read the Bhagavad Gita. Read up on what Ramana Maharshi actually taught. Anton wrote, just inquire is more like just bypass. It's so true. And Ramana Maharshi himself said it. Samadhi will not tend to these things. And he gave the example of a great saint who had the capacity to go into full-on samadhi where he would lose awareness of the world. Like that's like the deepest level of samadhi, union, where you literally lose awareness. Unconsciously, all of us experience samadhi every night in our sleep, but it's not full samadhi because it's done through the mechanism of sleep, but we lose awareness of the world. And so this great saint could just go into full-on samadhi, and this great saint was like really thirsty. It's like, oh, I'm really thirsty. I need to get something to drink. But then decided to go into samadhi instead. So for days and days and days, I forget how long the story goes, This person was completely unaware of the world, of their body, just like in union. And they came back, and their first thought was, I'm thirsty. I need to go get something to drink. Because samadhi and self-inquiry leads to samadhi, it can even lead to temporary samadhi, doesn't tend to tamas and rajas guna. It's designed for someone who has a sattvic mind. Marion Rose, have you considered advising people who are trying to recover from Neo-Advaita to just walk away and just be, not do anything formally spiritual? Maybe be creative, write poetry, paint, etc. Thank you, Marion. So, first of all, that's advice I give to myself. I'm not able to 100%. So I've walked away from Neo-Advaita. Then I walked away from traditional Advaita. It's just not the path for me. And for some people, I think that's the way, is to just completely turn their back on everything spiritual and to do some of the things that Miriam suggested, to, in essence, just be a human being. And for me, that's a huge part of it. I'm not able to do that 100%. Or that just doesn't seem like the best course of action for me. I need to find I do have a strong vocation. Addictive tendencies aside, I have a vocation to the spiritual life. And if I focus too much on metaphysical topics and sadhana, non-dual sadhana, I get imbalanced. So personally, I'm trying to find the balance of, yes, of being creative. And that is one of the suggestions that I put for people. So if you go to my webpage and it says how to recover, and I've come up with a draft of a process for recovery. Cultivating a hobby is something that I and again, these are just recommendations. And then here's something I wrote: finding activities that balance spirituality with connection to other people. Dance, eye gazing, tantra, circling, nonviolent communication. I don't know if I have creativity. I think I'll add that in there. Thank you, Marian. And the thing is each person is different. For some people, it may very well be best to just walk away from everything spiritual. Hi, six live. And so that's the thing. See, Neo-Advaita is a formula, and formulas don't work. Like formulas work for like fixing tires and like unlocking doors. Like the formula to unlock a door is like have the proper key, insert, turn. But even that doesn't work because some locks you have to turn this way, some locks you have to turn and then simultaneously lift the handle. Some, if you turn and lift the handle, the door handle, like it won't work. You have to like turn, let go, and lift the handle. So formulas only work for the most basic of things, and Neo-Advaita is nothing, just a complete formula. So in I've offered a map, and I've tried to make it very clear that the map out of Neo-Advaita is going to be very different. And here on this channel, what I focus on is just the first couple parts of that map of understanding the difference between Neo-Advaita and traditional Advaita, and then stopping all Neo-Advaita. So, but thank you, Marian. I'm going to put in the idea, I put in something about cultivating a hobby, but I think you're right that something creative, a creative hobby. I mean, most hobbies are, and thank you. And the thing is kind of we're discovering this map together. So, Jorgal, there's rather practical and mundane types of spirituality, such as mindfulness, and there's potentially harmful stuff like Kundalini and New Age woo. So mindfulness is tricky. The mindfulness movement is, in my view, is falling under the same problem that Neo-Advaita is it teaches the final practice. So mindfulness taught by itself, I consider harmful. Mindfulness, the Buddha taught 8 steps, and mindfulness is, I forget whether it's the 6th or 7th step in the process. It has the Buddha's path has preparatory practices as well. I'm going to look this up right now. So it's one thing to practice like 5 minutes of mindfulness, but it's the 7th step in a process. And so to practice mindfulness, again, 5 minutes a day, probably great. An hour a day, big problem. Mindfulness will bring up unconscious material. And if you're not properly prepared, then you won't know how to deal with it. So I'm much less versed in the classic Buddhist teachings, but I speak from experience. I did a mindfulness program where we did mindfulness 45 minutes every day for 2 months, and some days longer. And it messed me up. Mindfulness just by itself, I consider in the same category as self-inquiry. It's just the opposite. Self-inquiry is turning away. Mindfulness is turning within. And there's dragons in there. And without preparation, it's not a good idea. Now, there are some other Buddhist practices like compassion and like loving kindness that are a little less. See, the thing is spiritual practices are like our technology, and again, there's a big difference between doing something for 5 or 10 minutes and a day and doing something for an hour every day. Yeah, Marion, I'm going to disagree with you on that one. So Marion wrote, simple zazen, just sitting and accepting what comes and goes. It is as much as anyone needs. I would say without guidance, again, if you do it for 5 minutes, but to really sit that for someone who has trauma, for someone who has anger issues, for someone who has anxiety, any meditative practice that has you turn within can make things worse. If you have serious unresolved psychological issues, anything that turns within can exasperate those issues. So I think it's a beautiful practice. And it just, again, I'm much less versed in Buddhism than I am in, but I speak from experience. I had a full-on meltdown from going on a mindfulness program where there was no preparation, and the other parts of the Eightfold Path weren't taught. So Anton wrote, in my eyes nowadays, the most spiritual and conscious people are the people who look the most alive with energy and a smile. People who are not out to transcend their humanity, but to live fully. Integration is a really, it's a powerful path to be like, to hold this idea of like, yes, this world is temporary. And as you said, Anton, to seek to live it and to do it. And that's more the path that I strive to and aspire to. And it's not easy for me because I just want to, I think I was a monk in a past life because I just want to monk out and meditate out. Clinical work should not be disregarded for a suffering mind. I couldn't agree more. And so that's kind of the thing is with Neo-Advaita, and it does happen with mindfulness and Buddhism, it kind of turns into this self-help program when it's not. in Buddhism, it's in most schools, it's considered essential to have a teacher, but it's absolutely considered essential to be doing it within a sangha, to where you can talk to other people who are undertaking this discipline. So, Marion, well, get counseling before beginning any spiritual journey. I'm talking about people who are reasonably balanced and psychologically. Yeah. So, well said, Marion. Marion wrote, well, get counseling before beginning any spiritual journey. I'm talking about people who are reasonably balanced and psychologically mature. If Neo-Advaita was only taught to people who were reasonably balanced and psychologically mature, well, first of all, they wouldn't fall for it. And second of all, they might get a little benefit out of it. I mean, I hate to say that, but there is some, even in Neo-Advaita, there is some truth and some value. There's also, sadly, so much nonsense. So yeah, it kind of just comes down to preparatory practices, whether we're talking about mindfulness or Neo-Advaita, the lack thereof. Yeah. So I'm going to wrap in a minute or so. If anyone has anything else they'd like to add, please do. Right? Like, there's this idea out there, like, just meditate. And it's not just Neo-Advaita, it's not just mindfulness, like, just meditate. Well, that might be the wrong medicine for somebody. It's very enticing. Jorgal wrote, you can do both. Have psychological support counseling and spirituality. And as long as people don't get obsessive about the practice, they should stay unharmed. Yeah, and here's the thing of having a teacher or a counselor or a supportive community that can give you honest feedback. Yeah, it's definitely not an either or. The thing is, though, but I will say with Neo-Advaita, it is an either or. I tried for a long time to have my cake and eat it too, to practice Neo-Advaita and to live a normal life, and I failed. They're just completely contradictory, because Neo-Advaita, again, turns you away from the world, away from your body and your emotions. So, of course, a healthy spiritual path doesn't preclude. In fact, I would say a healthy spiritual path is focused on just what Anton said, of integration and participation. Yeah. Truth. Marion wrote, meditation inevitably brings stuff up. And so it's up to the individual to decide whether they should seek clinical help first or whether they can release stuff as it shows up. Truth. I mean, no one told me. I just read some books and tried to do it on my own. And then I actually did go to people who were like lineaged teachers, and this was in Buddhism. I don't mean to knock Buddhism as a whole, but lineage teachers, and they didn't tell me, that meditation would bring stuff up. Like, I was drowning in stuff, and so I thought, oh, well, I just need to meditate more, which then brought up more stuff. So the moral of the story is spirituality is not as simple as we've been led to believe, both in Neo-Advaita, there's another extent in the mindfulness movement, but also just in general. If you go to the spirituality section, there's all these books that are like, just do this practice. It's just not quite as easy as that. That was my experience. And then I started studying traditional Advaita Vedanta, and then that helped me to give words to explain why all the different practices I was doing didn't work. It actually made me worse. All right, beautiful souls. I need to wrap there. Thank you so much, everyone, for your input. I wish I'd said this at the beginning. I need to start every video like this. I'm not a guru. I'm not a master. And I just share my own experience and what I've learned. Please sit with what I'm saying. Please don't blindly believe anything I say. And I'm going to encourage anyone who's serious about spirituality to find a legitimate lineage teacher who is part of a lineage and part of a tradition. That's my bias, because I tried the other things so much. And to be wary of a self-help teacher who charges a lot of money and teaches a meditative technique. I've been down that road too. I guess I'm just trying to teach common sense, and initially in the early Buddhist scriptures, it's said that the Buddha called his teaching the middle way. And I think there's something to be said for that. It's not like you have to become a Buddhist, but the middle way. And many things that people have said here today are about balance and integration and common sense. Like some of Marion's thing of go talk to a counselor if need be, or this practice is only for someone who's spiritually mature, and so it's just common sense, right? But I wasn't taught that. I was taught the opposite of that. And so part of what I feel like I'm doing here on this channel is just bringing common sense, sharing some common sense with spirituality, because it's just not been the case. It's not 100%. I'm not saying it's 100% hasn't been the case, but in the modern spiritual world, like common sense is just not the middle way. Is just not. It doesn't sell books, and the fact that the spirituality has become commercialized is a whole problem, because the stuff that's really necessary, the common sense, it's not sexy. It's not going to sell books, and it doesn't offer quick fix or salvation. So many interesting topics. Thank you. Being embracing both the relative and the absolute, not either or, sounds good to me. Truth. And I'll tell you, Anton, I've been trying to do it for a long time. It's not easy. It's not easy. That's not to say it can't be done. And when talking about the ego, Ramana Maharshi once said, "You can't expect the criminal to turn themselves in." The ego is very subtle. Thank you, Anton. I relate to you. The pull to just zone out and escape is strong at times. Heard, understood. Thank you, beautiful souls. I really appreciate the input and everyone's sharings. And again, I'm not a guru. I'm not a teacher. I just share what my experience and what I believe to be true. Marion wrote, "I was lucky starting out with no internet and real people. A different era and a generation entirely." I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. A different era. Well said, Marion. We're in a different era spiritually, and I believe there's a lot of grace available. There's also a lot of deception going on. Thanks, beautiful souls. Take care.